Hey there berries, welcome to the patch 12.3 support tier list. Doing these every 2 weeks to make sure that you're up to date on what champions to play in your solo queue games. If you just missed it, today I released a Renetta new support that's coming out in 12.4 ability list, and we're going to be covering her as well throughout the coming weeks and months as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see new stuff about that new champion coming out. She looks pretty broken. But for now, let's calm down a little bit, because we're on patch 12.3, the one before that she gets released. And there are some changes coming into supports, nothing crazy compared to the last patch with the Janna and the Senna and the Tom Kench changes, but there are some things to talk about here at least. So the biggest one this patch, well there's two big ones really, is brand ulti change. So if you're a brand main, you kind of know what we're talking about here. So the main thing is that the ulti is prioritizing nearby targets over brand. So sometimes when you would cast your ult on brand, it would go to, say if you did it on a minion wave to try and then connect it to an enemy, it would sometimes just bounce back to you, bounce back to the minion and bounce back. What this change will hopefully mean is that if you are a minion to then hopefully bounce onto an enemy champion, it is much more likely to do that now rather than just come back to yourself. So that's a pretty huge brand buff, particularly for laning phase. So big thumbs up for that one. And the mana refund occurs if the spell kills the target. I thought that was the case anyway, but apparently that wasn't the case. So Brand's getting some little extra mana if he is going to be played in the mid laner / AP carry role. So maybe we might see a couple more brands being played this patch coming. Now Senna, I'll look into the champion nerfs. There's two things there. There's the Senna and the Glacial Janna. Now the Senna nerf is directly nerfing AD carry Senna, not support Senna. Support Senna is going to be staying pretty much exactly the same, and she is insanely good right now. So keep playing Senna in the support role. AD carry Sennas might end up doing some sort of gold funneling thing where it's like they don't kill the minions, they let the support kill the minions, and then they'll still be able to get soul generation that way, and then the support ends up having a bit more gold because they're allowed to last hit. It ends up being super messy, but usually that only ever happens in like super high ELO, so generally don't worry about it. Glacial Janna got fixed. So if you saw some of my Glacial Janna videos on the YouTube for last patch, there was a bug where the Glacial Augment was staying on the ground for like a solid 20 seconds when it shouldn't be the case. So that's been fixed. Her win rate will go ever slightly down because of it, but Glacial Janna is still the best thing to do. So yeah, you can thank me for that one. Champion adjustments. The main one here is Nami. So I believe this is technically a Nami buff, not just a champion adjustment. So if you're unaware, when you heal an ally as Nami, or if you use your ulti or give them your E buff or land a bubble on an ally, they get movement speed. That used to be just a flat movement speed over 1.5 seconds. But now the passive is going to give you more movement speed at the start and less at the end. So what that means is that if you're pursuing somebody, so if you give your ally the E if in a pursuit, it will give your ally just a little bit more to catch up, which will then allow them to apply the slow, which in those kind of situations is quite a big buff to Nami and the catch potential there. Because by the time you caught them and hit them with the slow, the decaying movement speed at the end doesn't really make any difference. So that could be a huge buff in terms of Nami in some certain situations. And also like getting away from like an enemy skill shot. Like if you can see the skill shot coming through, you buff your ally and they're able to like just about get out of the way of it in time. So there are a couple of situations here where I would say that this is a decent Nami buff. This patch also includes a lot of item changes. Fortunately, for us support small brains that can't CS, they haven't really done anything to the support role in terms of the item changes. There is the list here if you want to freeze it, but the only one really I want to talk about here is the Black Cleaver. The Black Cleaver is basically getting buffed for something like a Senna. So if you were to run Black Cleaver Senna, you're getting a tiny bit more extra AD, less health, but a tiny bit more haste. That's the gist behind it. I think they're trying to make it potentially so like the bruises aren't as bruisey. But that's the gist I've got it from it. But we'll have to see how that plays out in the games itself. But nothing here directly buffing or nothing supports. So hooray for our small brains. Going into the tier list now. I actually was quite aggressive here on the changes. So you're going to see some fluctuations here from last 2 weeks ago. Tier 5 is exactly the same, just this is the garbage tier. Oops, the garbage tier. I was going to hide myself there. Garbage tier, you don't bother playing those as support, please, pretty please, okay. Moving on to tier 4, now up there, I moved Tom Kench down. I think I put him in tier 2 or tier 3. I can't remember what I did last couple of weeks ago. But he's tier 4. The buffs helped, but he's still pretty bad. I don't think that's primarily his fault. It's mainly just the fact that tanks are just kind of rarely played at the moment, and the enchanters haven't been nerfed, so enchanter meta is still very strong and very dominant right now. So Tom Kent just doesn't quite live up to those standards. I don't know how they can maybe buff him, maybe the animation engage speed increase or something like that. But right now, tier 4, kind of high on the tier 4, I would say. But overall, I'd still would not recommend. I decided to completely gut Seraphine, by the way. Sorry, Seraphine fans. Seraphine tier 4, I've decided that she's just not worth playing. I think her ulti is still really, really good. I just think there's just much better support champions out there. I think I've overrated her slightly in the last couple of tier lists, and my apologies on that, but I'm starting to go against playing Seraphine, honestly, and not really seeing the hassle of that. The off-meta pick so far of the season, I've moved down into tier 4. I feel like it's just something that you don't need to worry about anyway right now, because the other champions are so good right now. But Ari might creep up a little bit, maybe after her little rework as well. She might be stronger playing as support, but for now we're going to keep her in at tier 4. So we're going to move up gently up to tier 3. And bear in mind, if you are new to these tier lists are kind of catered to people that are like unranked to low plat, by the way. So you're going to see stuff like here, for example, Yumi, that is extremely good in high elo, but not so good in the lower elos, just because the people that you're attached to, you know, can't live to the high standards of Yumi. But I did move Pyke up from tier 4 to tier 3. I feel like he's been doing quite decently right now. I moved Brand down from tier 2 to tier 3. I feel like some of the mages are falling off a little bit, and you'll start to see that in tier 2. Nautilus, I moved down to tier 2 to tier 3. So you can see I've been quite aggressive on moving a lot of champions this time around. But hopefully this will give you a better reflection on what is good from unranked to low plat. So yeah, I mean, Karma is probably one of the stronger ones in tier 3. I think her laning phase can be incredibly good. She does fall off later into the game, but a lot of games are won by laning phase. So Karma is definitely one of the stronger ones in the tier 3 there. Moving up to tier 2, some of you might be kind of shook by the fact that Lux and Zyra are now in tier 2. Tier 2 list is kind of small, and that is, I believe, all the mages. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like the mage win rate overall as support, it's not bad. Like Lux and Zyra are still pretty solid champions that you can play in solo queue. So if you are adamant about playing them, don't worry about it. You're still in a good spot. It's still fine. Breathe, relax. But they're just not as good as the enchanters. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Just not as good as the enchanters. And I'd even argue some situations like the Lulu that we're talking about with the Yumi, for example, reliance on other people. You could potentially, the lower ELO you are, nudge Lulu into tier 3. So if you're like in bronze iron, Lulu could actually be a tier 3 pick. But Blitzcrank has, decent solo queue potential, really decent. And the Zillion I've kept at tier 2. I think it's a spicy pick if you want something a bit spicy. Definitely consider playing Zillion if you want something fresh. A little underrated, a little underplayed, particularly on EU. I think NA has it a little bit higher in popularity, but I think Zilean is actually legit doing all right now. He's kind of like stealthily being relevant while no one's really still playing him at the moment. So keep an eye out on that one. Tier 1, of course, we've got all the Uwu crew. Senna has been moved up from tier 2 to tier 1. I knew the Senna buffs would be huge. I didn't realize they'd be that huge though. She's absolutely dominating in solo queue right now, particularly if you are high elo. Senna is a champion where it is based on purely on your own mechanics. If you have an AD history, you'll be fine playing Senna, but she's doing really well right now. If you are looking for a damaging support, I would urge you to look more towards Senna if possible, rather than something like the Zyra or the Lux. But as I said before, you can still play Zyra and Lux and do perfectly fine. Nami, technically, as we talked about earlier, got a slight buff, really, in my opinion, and nothing else unchanged, so she's still a solid pick in tier 1. Glacier Janna did get like slightly nerfed, but it's more of a bug fix more than anything. She's still doing extremely well against hard engaged like the Leona pick, but Leona is still probably the strongest tank pick overall, but probably the worst pick for her into Janna. But she does insanely well against the hard engaged supports, the Janna, and then also later on into the game, into the bigger team fights. Against assassins, she's able to provide really nice peel for that, and any engage in general. So you can generally protect your squishy members of your team quite nicely. And Senna and Soraka are doing incredibly well as well. Both kind of slightly different gameplay. Soraka, you're looking to harass a lot in the early laning phase, and then you can heal single targets later on. Senna, iffy, more risky damage in the laning phase. But as soon as you get your couple of items going and you're in those team fight states, your W's with the Moonstone are going to be shielding and healing for a ridiculous amount. Had a video on the channel, I think it was a week ago now, 20,000 bonus healing and shielding on Senna, something absolutely insane. So Senna's doing absolutely amazing in his team fights, and you know, she doesn't require that much for in team fights. Her only skill shot is our ultimate, and generally in those team fights you are looking to use your W power chord passive on high damage targets to prevent damage coming through. And then once you got those two things nailed down, Senna's not really that difficult champion to play, and she's got a massive reward for doing so. So, you know, on the same kind of like wavelength-ish of like, you know, Yumi kind of learning curve, and you know, it's not that big of a curve and it's quite easy to come into. So if you are new to support, Senna could be the pick for you. But I hope that this 12.3 tier list helps you out. I'm really looking forward to bringing you some new champion gameplay coming soon in the next few days. So make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel for that. I'm going to be streaming that on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry if you want to see me play the new support on PBE, or if you want to join in for some viewer games and help me out and find out all the exploits of her. You're more than welcome to come over and help me out. And yeah, keep an eye out for those new videos. Stay very awesome, and see you soon for another video.